The night had not yet decided what it wanted to be, triumph or tragedy, and somewhere in that fragile space between the two stood Carlos Alcaraz. The crowd in Paris hummed with anticipation, a sea of restless energy waiting to erupt, their cheers swirling through the arena like a restless wind. For weeks, the whispers had grown louder. The prodigy from Spain, the world #1, the boy who seemed destined to conquer every surface and silence every doubt. And yet, as the first ball was struck that evening, something in the air felt uncertain, almost trembling. From the first rally, you could see the tension etched on Alcaraz's face, a mixture of concentration and quiet frustration. His footwork was precise, his shots crisp, but there was a heaviness in his shoulders, an invisible weight pressing down with every swing. Norrie, steady as ever, moved across the court with the calm of a man who had nothing to lose. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, only patience and a plan. The first set unfolded like a promise fulfilled. Alcaraz played with the electricity that had made him the sport's most dazzling star. His forehand cracked through the air with the sound of confidence. His drop shots painted the court with delicate genius. And when he raised his fist after clinching the set, the crowd roared as though the outcome was already decided. They believed they were watching the inevitable, another chapter in the rise of the young Spanish king. But destiny, that cruel and unpredictable force, was waiting in the shadows. As the second set began, small cracks started to show, first in his timing, then in his body language. A missed forehand here, a rushed serve there. It wasn't just the errors, it was the silence between them, the moments when Alcaraz looked toward his coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero, his eyes searching for reassurance that refused to come. The rhythm that had carried him so far, that effortless blend of aggression and joy, seemed to falter, replaced by an edge of desperation. Norrie, sensing the shift, began to step forward, testing the Spaniard's patience. He didn't overpower Alcaraz. He simply refused to give him what he wanted: rhythm, space, comfort. Each rally became a battle of restraint, and every point that slipped away carved a deeper scar into Alcaraz's composure. The crowd could feel it too. Their cheers grew quieter, more cautious, as if afraid that belief alone might not be enough to save him this time. By the middle of the second set, Alcaraz's frustration was impossible to hide. He bounced his racket against the court after another unforced error, his 54th by the end of the night, a number that told the story better than any commentary could. For every point he won, 2 slipped through his fingers. His body language spoke louder than his game. The restless pacing between points, the clenched jaw, the muttered words to himself that no one could quite hear. The brilliance was still there, flickering like a candle in the wind, but it was fighting against something stronger, doubt. At one changeover, he sat down, towel over his head, and spoke quietly to Ferrero. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion, emotional, mental, spiritual. The young man who had conquered Roland Garros, who had lifted trophies under every kind of light, looked suddenly fragile. The indoor court of Paris, so often a stage for champions, felt like an unfamiliar world to him, its surface betraying the rhythm he thrived on. Each ball skid a little lower, each bounce a little less forgiving. And every time he tried to adjust, it felt like the court was moving beneath him. When Norrie took the second set, there was no explosion of noise, just a wave of disbelief. The crowd wasn't sure what to make of it. This wasn't supposed to happen. Alcaraz losing so early, so suddenly, seemed unthinkable. Yet tennis, like life, doesn't follow scripts written in glory. It follows the truth of the moment. And that night, truth was cruel. In the final set, Alcaraz fought. Of course he did. Champions always do. But there was a tremor in his game now, a visible hesitation before each shot. He was no longer dictating. He was reacting. Norrie sensed it and grew bolder, pushing Alcaraz into uncomfortable positions, forcing him to play shots he didn't want to play. The rallies stretched longer, and with each exchange, the young Spaniard's confidence drained away. There came a moment late in the third set when the crowd rose to its feet, not in celebration, but in desperate encouragement. They wanted to lift him, to remind him who he was. But the eyes that once danced with joy and belief were clouded now. The racket that once painted masterpieces across the court felt heavy in his hands. Every movement spoke of a battle not against Norrie, but against himself. When the final ball struck the net and fell to his side, there was a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the arena. Alcaraz stood still for a moment, his chest rising and falling, sweat dripping down his face like quiet tears. Across the net, Norrie lifted his arm in restrained triumph. No wild celebration, just a nod of respect. He knew what this victory meant, not just for him, but for the entire balance of the sport. As Alcaraz walked to the net and extended his hand, the cameras caught something rare, not anger but humility. The handshake was brief, but the look in his eyes lingered, that haunting mixture of disbelief and acceptance that only defeat can bring. He nodded slightly as if telling himself, "It's okay," but even he knew it wasn't. He turned toward the crowd, raising his hand in quiet acknowledgement. They cheered for him not as a winner, but as one of their own, a reminder that even the greatest can falter. The applause carried warmth, but also sorrow, because everyone in that arena had witnessed something human. The fall of a giant, the stumble of a star who had made them believe in invincibility. Back in his chair, Alcaraz leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the ground. Ferrero approached, resting a hand on his shoulder. There were no words, only silence and understanding. Sometimes the lessons of the game don't come from victory, but from the strange peace that follows defeat. In the press room later, Alcaraz faced the questions with honesty. His voice was calm, but you could hear the fatigue beneath it. "I didn't feel comfortable today," he admitted. "I tried everything, but nothing was working. The court, my timing, my confidence, it was like fighting against myself." Reporters scribbled furiously, but beyond the words was a deeper truth. This was a young man learning, once again, that greatness is not built on talent alone, but on how you carry yourself when everything unravels. Meanwhile, outside the court, the implications of his defeat were already spreading through the tennis world like wildfire. With Alcaraz's early exit, a door had opened for Jannik Sinner, the quiet, composed Italian whose consistency and calm had turned him into a symbol of discipline and perseverance. If Sinner could go far in Paris, even win it, he would reclaim the #1 spot. The race for dominance had suddenly become alive again. Fans across the world began to draw comparisons, to debate, to dream. Could this be the start of a new chapter? A rivalry defined not by arrogance, but by respect? Alcaraz and Sinner, two young titans, each carrying a nation's hope, destined to trade blows not just on court, but in history itself. But in that moment, Alcaraz wasn't thinking of rankings or headlines. He was thinking of the feeling, that hollow ache that follows a loss you can't quite explain. He remembered his childhood days on the clay courts of Murcia, where he'd learned to fight for every ball with joy, not pressure. And as he sat there in the stillness of a locker room, the echoes of the match fading into memory, he realized that perhaps defeat, too, has its own kind of victory, the kind that teaches you who you are when the cheers fade. Outside, Paris carried on, lights twinkling across the Seine, the air filled with the quiet hum of a city that doesn't pause for heartbreak. And somewhere amid it all, a young champion walked alone for a moment, feeling the sting of loss, but also the faint flicker of something else, hunger. Because even when a crown slips, the desire to reclaim it burns brighter than ever. And as Jannik Sinner prepared for his next match, the world watched, not just to see if he would rise to #1, but to see how Carlos Alcaraz, the fallen king of Paris, would rise again.